Hi, everyone. I'm incredibly excited for today's conversations with B. I'm sitting here with Nisha Chittal. And you might wonder, okay, so Nisha and I have known each other for 15 years. Many of you know about this thing that I started called Gal's Guide. It was this, I guess you can call it a passion project to talk about what life was like out of school in the big city. And Nisha was one of the contributors and amazing writers. And Nisha today is the chief of staff for Vox Media. Hi, Nisha. Thanks for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I can't believe how long it's been. And I remember I was on a business trip in New York and I was visiting you when you're working for MSNBC, well, which is now MS Now. That
Yes.
changed the name. So many questions. And I know people who watch this are going to be so inquisitive for many reasons about what you're doing now, your career, the state of journalism. But I want to go back a little bit. As a fellow Midwesterner, I
hmm
know you grew up in Illinois in a suburb there, and you went, it seems like you went straight out of school to New York. Share with us a bit of your path, what you studied, and where you went out of school and what brought you to your geographic location today.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yes, I grew up in Naperville, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago. And I realized in high school I was really passionate about politics and government. Those were always my favorite classes. And I also really enjoyed writing and journalism. And so I thought going into college, I was a political science major. I would have loved to do political science and journalism and double major, but those were in separate schools at my university. So had to pick one, picked
Yep.
political science. I went to the University of Illinois, which is in Urbana-Champaign, Illinois. So about 2.5 hours south of Chicago. And I studied political science and I thought I would become a political journalist. When I was towards the end of college. I started, that was right around the time social media was just sort of a budding industry in its infancy. I
Hmm.
wouldn't even call it an industry then. I think people were starting to learn that social media was this thing. Companies should be
Yeah.
using it, brands should be using it. But social media manager jobs didn't exist yet. And I was writing for, I was trying to get internships and freelance experience and get clips while I was in school. And so I was interning for this political blog called Citizen Jane Politics.
Oh my gosh. Sorry. The
Yeah,
throwback. I love the
I
throwback
know,
references.
another throwback. And I was interning for this website and it was just writing, daily blog posts about the news, just getting reps really. And it was a great experience. And social media was brand new. And I told my editor, hey, I think we should have social media for our blog. We
Hmm.
should probably have a Facebook page. We should probably have Twitter. We could set up a YouTube channel. And when we do video interviews, we would typically embed them in our blog posts. But I'm like, we should have a YouTube channel and put our videos there. And she said, great, you should do that. I was, the young person on, it was a small little team. It was
Hmm.
just 3 or 4 of us. And I was the young person with an interest in social media. So she said, great, go ahead. And kind of gave me free reign to do that. And so I kind of taught myself, hey, this is how you build a little bit of a community. You build an audience. I learned how to manage social accounts. And then I realized as I was graduating, that's a whole skill set. And that is a pretty marketable skill set right now. And there's people, there's a lot of companies looking for that skill set. And so when I graduated, while I wanted to work in journalism, it was a tough time. It was right after the 2008 crash.
Hmm.
The economy was not in a great place, and journalism as an industry was not in a great place. And so there weren't a lot of journalism jobs, especially for somebody entry level right out of college. But what I did find was there were a lot of agencies that were hiring people who knew how to do social media. And so my first job ended up being at a marketing agency where I did social media management for clients. And then from there, I went, actually, I lived in Washington, D.C. right after
Okay.
college. So I went to work for this agency in D.C. I moved from Illinois to Washington, D.C. I ended up living there for 4 years. I worked at the agency for a couple years. Then I went and got a job as social media manager at the Travel Channel, which was
Hmm.
really fun. That was based in the DC area at the time, prior to it being part of Discovery, Warner
Yep.
Brothers, Paramount, whatever the company is now. And after that, I felt like my heart was in journalism and media, and that's the industry I really wanted to be in. So, working at the Travel Channel, I felt one step closer to that from marketing, which was, working at the agency was a great learning experience, and I learned a lot. But my heart wasn't really in like, writing Twitter copy for like pet food
Hmm.
brands and stuff. It just was not like what I felt a calling to do. So I went to Travel Channel and I was in kind of the media entertainment space. And that was one step closer, but it still wasn't like news and journalism. And then I got a really great opportunity in 2013 to go work for MSNBC and be a social media editor there. As you mentioned, me when I were meeting up with me when I worked there. So I that's when I moved to New York. I worked at MSNBC and then NBC News for about 4 years. Incredible experience. Worked in 30 Rock. Worked with so many, incredible journalists and anchors and producers, and it was just a incredible experience. And then, sorry, it's such a long story. After
I
that,
love it though. I love it.
what's that?
I love it.
Yeah. I'm like I'm rambling too much. You can cut it
No,
down in post if you want to.
no, I think all of it's incredibly just important to see the
Yeah.
path, and I think it's vital. I love hearing
Yeah.
these background stories.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So I worked at NBC. And then after the 2016 election, I was like a little bit burned out on hard news, especially working in cable news. The pace is pretty relentless. And that year,
Mhm.
2016, was just nonstop. I mean, I
Yeah.
had incredible opportunities. I traveled on the campaign trail. They were often sending me to presidential debates and town halls and stuff. And I was the person getting content for social media. I was like working with our anchors and getting them to do little videos for our Snapchat channel at the time.
Yep.
Instagram stories didn't launch that year in 2016. So that's how long ago this was. But I was like getting content for social media, like from the campaign trail. It was incredible. I was traveling all the time. But
Wow.
after the election, I was a little bit burned out and was sort of ready for a change. And I thought I would go work in lifestyle media, and that might be a nice change of pace. I went and worked for a food publication, Tasting Table, for a little under a year. Was food and cooking and restaurants have always been a passion of mine, so I thought that would be fun. Then I went to Racked, that was the start of my time at Vox Media, which was now almost
Mhm.
a decade ago. I went over to Vox and didn't think I would be in hard news again so soon, but
Mhm.
found that I really loved it. I really liked, after having been kind of tired of the pace of cable news, which is so relentless and there's so much news and so much information all the
Yeah.
time. I found Vox's approach really, really refreshing that, like, Vox's whole mission is to sift through the noise and help people understand what they really need to know and what really matters and how it impacts their lives. And I just found that so refreshing and so needed in this news landscape that we're in, where there is
Mhm.
so much information coming at people all the time, every day. And so I've been here ever since. I've now been here almost 9 years and worn a bunch of different hats. So I ran our audience development
Mhm.
team for a while. Then I eventually, I realized I wanted to expand beyond audience. And so I wanted to move into more of a newsroom leadership role. So I became the managing editor in 2021. And kind of took more oversight of more teams in the newsroom and our overall like editorial planning and strategy. And then how I became chief of staff, I wish I could. People do ask me about how do you become a chief of staff? How do you get that kind of role? I wish I had something helpful to say. But how it happened to me in my case was my boss, who at the time was the editor in chief, she was getting promoted to be the editor in chief and
Mhm.
publisher. And she took a look around the organization and was thinking about what kind of leadership team she needed. And she came to me and she said, I need someone to be my chief of staff. And you're already kind of my number two. You help run so many things in the newsroom. I think you'd be perfect for this role and I want you to step into this role and kind of come on this journey with me. And so I did. And it's been a wild ride since then. I now have in this role, I kind of sit at the intersection of both our editorial and our
Mhm.
business. And my boss and I are responsible for Vox's, both our journalism and maintaining a sustainable, healthy business for Vox. And so I've learned a lot about the business of media, which was completely new to me a few years ago, having always been on the editorial side. But it's been so interesting to learn about it. And a really great growth opportunity for me, and I've learned so much and I've really enjoyed it. And so that's where I am now currently.
That was such a great storytelling part in terms of where you started and where you are,
Mhm.
because so many different folks listen to this or will see clips. And especially for people in school or who have similar interests in that field, it's helpful for them to know. So thank you for that. And
Yeah.
for people who are watching or listening, can you help them understand all the different elements under Vox? What makes up Vox Media so folks have the complete totality as we're talking so they know what is under the umbrella?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I was actually wondering if I should clarify that at some point. So, Vox Media is the parent company, which does
Hmm.
include like a big portfolio of brands. It includes Vox.com, where I work, Eater, SB Nation, The Verge, Pop Sugar, Vox Media Podcast Network, which has a whole is a division of many podcasts. So there are many New York Magazine, I can't forget them. There are many brands under the whole Vox
Hmm.
Media umbrella and the larger company. My purview specifically is I work on the Vox brand. So what that includes is Vox.com, our
Hmm.
website. We also have several podcasts, Today Explained, Unexplainable, The Gray Area, Explain It to Me. Those are kind of our flagship podcasts. We have a new one launching later this spring that I'm working on now. And we have a pretty robust video operation too. And many people know us also for our explainer videos on YouTube. So that's kind of what's within the larger Vox Media parent company. And then my remit is Vox, the Vox brand specifically, which includes our website, podcasts, and video.
You're not busy at all.
No, not busy at all. Very busy, but it's really good. It's all, such interesting work. And, right now we're like my work includes like we're launching a new show next month. A lot of our existing podcasts we're bringing into they've been strictly audio and we're bringing them into video formats.
Hmm.
We're thinking about updates to our website and our homepage, and we launched a membership program a couple years ago, and we've been growing that. So there is always something. We're planning a couple live events for April and May, so there's always something really interesting and new and fun to work on.
And I also was looking forward to our chat because your history and your background is so varied, but also thorough when it comes to different types of media, different types of journalism. There's still a bit of poli sci, I'm sure, in there with what you're doing
Mhm.
now with work. It's a big question, I know, but I really wanted to ask you because I listened to my list of my wonks and my
Yeah.
usual suspects and podcasts I listen to, but I want to hear it from you. Having seen the ebb and flow, you mentioned social media before it was considered
Mhm.
like an actual business development unit, if you will. What are your thoughts with how journalism has changed so much? What would you say to someone that is just trying to keep up with how journalism is changing to ensure that the source is as neutral and factual as possible, given how many holding companies and changes are happening in the world of who's buying who and who's bidding for what? How does that change how you manage or how your team goes about delivering the news? Things have changed when it comes to fact finding and information sharing.
Yeah. A few things. One, I think that it is the responsibility is really on us in the media to earn people's trust. We can't just I think there are some in the journalism industry who think they're kind of outraged that people don't want to read news and they don't want to consume long form journalism and they just want to watch 60-second videos from creators. I think we can't fight with audience behavior, like that is a losing battle. I think one, you have to it's on us to meet the audience where they are and adapt
Hmm.
to how they want to consume information. And it's also on us to win back their trust and show them why they can trust us. I think sometimes in media institutions, especially legacy media institutions, there's this sense that like they should trust us because we are this, 100-year-old institution. Um, and they just should trust us because of our name, because of who we are. But I find that like none of like we can't just assume that people know how journalism and how the reporting process works. And it's worth to like build trust with your audience, telling them how it works, telling them what your methods are. We're trying to
Hmm.
do more things of we've started sometimes doing in big stories a little sidebar that talks about how I reported this. Like here's what my reporting process was. Here's how many people I talked to. I
Mm.
traveled to this place. I interviewed this many people. I poured over all of these documents, like little details like that from behind the scenes that help people understand what the reporting process actually looks like. That helps build trust. Or, we are doing, and we're certainly not alone. Many publishers are doing these little expanded author bios at the top of stories where instead of just seeing the byline of the name of the person who wrote it, it also lists a little bit of information about them and what their credentials are. They have this degree. They wrote this book on this topic. Like, here's why they're an expert, like showing your
Uh,
expertise. And that gives people, the audience more reasons to trust you because they see your credentials and they know you're not just like some name on the internet, right? So taking the audience behind your reporting process, showing them how it works,
hmm.
what you're doing as a journalist, as a publication to do the work, to read the documents, to do the reporting, to make calls, to fact check. We send out these like behind the scenes newsletters to our members, and those often go, behind the scenes of different aspects of our work. And we've done one before that talked about here's what our fact checking process looks like. Because we do have fact checking at Vox. And, we think that is one of the reasons that our audience values us and trusts us. And the roundabout answer to your question is like it's on us as journalists and media outlets to build trust with the audience and show them
Hmm.
why they should trust us and how we got from point A to point B and what our process was and build that trust.
I like what you said earlier. The assumption that if you can see a legacy news org that's been around for a while, it's
Mhm.
assumed trust and so on. What fascinates me right now from a trend perspective, when you mentioned journalists and anchors and former anchors, like, Don Lemon doing his thing, so many folks leaving and or going from whether it's legacy or a newer media
Mhm.
organization to have their mini team, like a team of one, a
Yeah.
media team of one. Do you see that happening more and more as all this transition happens in newsrooms across the country? Do you see folks taking like the Don Lemon approach to go man on the street, still getting the interviews, still, following things? Of course, hopefully journalists don't get arrested like he did. But what are your thoughts on the not factions, but I can say like mini newsrooms of all these
Yeah.
journalists doing their
Yeah,
thing?
like creator journalism
Yeah.
essentially. Yeah, I mean, I think that creator journalism is very much on the rise. It's something that we in the media industry are thinking about and talking about a lot. I do, yeah, I see more and more people going that route of going independent and starting their own Substack or
Hmm.
doing the creator journalism through social video on Instagram and TikTok. And I think that's great. I mean, there are many people from Vox who have gone on to do that very successfully. There's so many news creators that I follow and I enjoy watching their videos or reading their newsletters. I think that, I think there's like room for both in the
Hmm.
media space. I think, the only challenge I think is that now consumers have like more choices than ever in
Yeah.
what they consume. I don't think the rise of creator journalism is a bad thing at all, and I don't see it as like a threat to media institutions. I think we can all both coexist, and something we're thinking about a lot at Vox too is like how we in many news outlets we're far from the only ones is like how do we do creator partnerships. Sorry, my phone's buzzing and I'm just going to stop it. I don't know if you're
Yep.
going to hear that in the back. I don't want it to like buzz on the table.
No problem.
I'll just move that. You can cut that whole thing out. So I don't see creator journalism as a threat to media institutions. I think we can all coexist and in many people I talk to, like their media diet includes both news outlets and also consuming news through TikTok videos. And I think there's like a place for both of those things and a role for both of those things.
Because you've seen different facets of that world
Mhm.
and all the places where you've been. Like even when you mentioned the presidential elections, and even though it was insane with all the travel,
Mhm.
to be on a fly on your wall of those trips and to see some of the interactions and to see the buzz with what was happening with people and voters, like that's incredibly electric. But do you have any top tips of what you would add or change within the industry for whether it's the consumers or even because of that trust factor you mentioned and how it's on the media companies to get that trust? Are there any things that you've noticed over the years, nuances or things that you think for the not just a Vox, but from a whole entire vertical perspective of media and journalism that you think, man, if we did this better, or if there was less of this, does anything come to mind?
Yeah, I think that like media organizations I think in this era, like we need to be a lot more nimble. Like we almost need to be like more startup-y and
Mm,
less slow and bureaucratic. And I think at Vox we're pretty nimble and that's something we work on every day. It's a smaller company and a smaller newsroom. So But I think there are many journalistic institutions, especially those that have been around for a long time and that are
Mhm.
legacy media. You see media layoffs every day. It feels like almost every day. And
I
that's
know.
really hard. I think that media institutions can't operate in the old models that they used to operate in, where there was different like revenue sources of revenue and funding back then, and newsrooms had really large newsrooms, and they were able to have lots of different beat reporters on lots of different topics. I think that we all have to think almost like nimble startups now, where people are able to flex across multiple different platforms, where people are able to think about a story both as a 1,200 word article or a social video or a podcast. That I think is like how we need to evolve to like meet audiences where they are now, and
Mhm.
in the ways they want to consume information. Because I don't think that audiences are turning away from news. They're just getting it in different ways and in different formats and different mediums than they used to. Then I think the challenge for us is like we really have to evolve. And sometimes I have seen like media institutions and especially like the bigger, older media companies, they have a really hard time adapting because they've gotten really big, they've gotten really bureaucratic, they're huge,
Mhm.
complex organizations. And so they're not able to like move quickly and adapt quickly and try something new without 100 people having to approve it or whatever. And so I think like those are the things that media organizations, especially legacy media, can do better to just be able to move quicker and try new things and evolve with how audience behavior is changing.
If you go back to your freshman self at U of I,
Mhm.
would you have told that person to keep the poli-sci major, switch to journalism? And then on that question, what would you tell the 2026 graduate today who's interested in both poli-sci and journalism as well, given what you've seen in your career and what you're seeing now from as being a media executive?
Yeah. It's a really interesting question. Thinking about college. Well, one thing I was hesitant about when I was trying to decide between poli sci and journalism in college, I was hesitant because even at that time in the 2000s, I really enjoyed reading blogs. I loved blogs, and it was very online even before social media existed. And I was hesitant about journalism as a major because you had to declare a specialty, and it was like print journalism or broadcast or radio. And
Got
even
it.
then in the 2000s, I was like, print or broadcast or radio? Like, I'm going into digital journalism. Like, I knew that. Like, I knew whatever I
Yeah,
was going to do was going to be online. And none of those things made sense to me. Like, it felt to me like college, what you learn in academia is kind of behind the times with like where industries are. Um,
agreed.
and I felt a little bit sometimes similar about with poli sci, even though I enjoyed my poli sci major. But I remember um, I was there when President Obama was running in 2008, and a big defining story of Obama's 2008 campaign was it was the first presidential campaign to use social media. And I
Mhm.
was fascinated by it at that time. Like we talked about, like social media was this new budding thing, and I was really interested in social media, and I was fascinated by how his campaign was using social media. And I was in a class that semester on campaigns and elections, and they were not talking about it at all. They were not talking about the interesting like I saw like real world application there of here's how this campaign is using
Mhm.
social media tools and platforms, and it was not being discussed in class at all because they were probably repeating the same textbooks they go through every year,
Yes.
and their
Yes.
textbooks didn't cover social media that's happening now in real time. So I to go back to your question, to go back and tell my freshman year self, I would probably tell her to stick with poli sci. I don't think necessarily missed anything by not majoring in journalism. I do tell college students who ask me for advice that you don't need to be a journalism major to become a journalist. But I would also tell her that college is so important and was such a formative experience in my life in so many ways. But I'm not sure how much I believe that like the classroom and academia prepares you for the real working world, because, academia is often divorced from like what is happening
I
both
completely agree.
in journalism and in politics.
Yes, I
Yeah.
completely agree.
Yeah.
So then 2026, for graduates today who are interested in journalism in general, what would you say to them about pursuing that in particular? Because I would hope, to your point, that 18 years later, academia is bringing in digital journalism and things are all online in their teachings. If you're a professor watching this, I hope that's the case. What would you tell today's student when they look at, oh my gosh, look at Nisha, what an amazing career, and I want to aspire to do something similar? Would you tell them to stay on a poli sci path or stick with journalism with kind of a eyes wide open sort of thing, given all the changes that are happening?
Think that, my sense, especially being in New York, I think sometimes spoken to journalism programs here in New York. And I think that, places like NYU, Columbia, like their journalism programs seem to be really like evolving with how
Hmm.
the media industry is changing. So I do think there's some like strong journalism programs out there that are keeping up with like the pace of change. I am still a believer that you don't necessarily need to major in journalism to be a journalist. I think to be a journalist, like you have to, I think any sort of liberal arts or humanities
Hmm.
major can prepare you for that. I think the most important thing is making actual journalism, and anyone can do that now. There's no barrier to entry, right? And there wasn't when I was in college. It was like you should start a blog, which I did have a blog at the time. And the print, we don't really do blogs anymore. Or Substack is kind of a blog,
Yeah.
but the principles are the same. Like back then, we would have told students like start a blog, start a Twitter. Like now, I would tell students have a Substack. You should be
Yep.
on Twitter, LinkedIn, X, LinkedIn, whatever platform. You should be also thinking about content creation, right? Like now, so much news and information is consumed through social video on TikTok and Instagram.
Yeah.
So I would be telling an aspiring journalist now, like, go show us what you can do on social platforms. Like, you should be making social video content and building your portfolio and showing people your journalism chops that way. And those are the skills that I think will set you up well for a successful career in journalism, more so than what you studied in school.
I really appreciate the fact that you're respectful and that you're recognizing that college is important and helpful and important to get you to where you are, but also that there's only so much that classrooms can teach when it comes to what's happening in the real world. When I go to classes and guest teach when it comes to digital marketing in general,
Mhm.
it's because of that very reason, whereby you can learn what programmatic advertising means, or you can learn what growth marketing means, but can you take an Excel spreadsheet and tell a story from it? So I appreciate the reminder that more real world experiences could be beneficial in the classroom to these students. You said something when we first spoke about your chief of staff role,
Mhm.
and I want to shift gears a bit in our conversation about, I believe you are a working mom. And I'd like to talk about that because you mentioned that your manager, your boss, had said she'd gotten this change and she wanted to look at the leadership team and what she was looking for, and that she turned to you, said, "Hey, I'm building this thing.
Mhm.
I'm looking around who's in the newsroom and who's been around doing XYZ. We'll love for you to come along." I think that's amazing to see a female leader doing that with another female leader to bring them along to help with this type of journey. I'll be honest with you, I know I'm older than you are. I have seen this in corporate, but I haven't seen it very often.
Mhm.
So before we talk about the balance, and actually, I don't even like the word balance of working mom because
I know I
everything
have
kind of blends
feelings about that
together.
too. We'll get there.
I have feelings. I have feelings about the word balance, and people know that I'm very like I don't like the word balance because what does that mean? Let's talk about what it was like when you were presented with a chief of staff option, and what it was like to have a female leader at the time turn to you to say, "I recognize this in you." She was proactive. Talk about that.
Um, it was. I'm trying to collect my thoughts.
Oh, sure.
It was great. It came as a little bit of a surprise because
Hmm.
I didn't, I was also learning at the time other
Hmm.
news, but it did feel good to know that my boss valued the work I was doing, and as she was moving up, valued what I could do and saw the skills I had and was bringing me along with her. I think even a couple years before that, another inflection point I had was when I was running the audience team at Vox, and I had been running audience and social and engagement teams for
Hmm.
a number of years at that point, and I really wanted to move from strictly audience to a more newsroom leadership role. And that is often a hard transition to make, and many audience development people in news and journalism that I talk to and am friends with, like we've all talked about how like it can be hard to make that jump because often
Yeah.
like newsroom leaders don't think of the audience person as somebody who's going to move into editorial leadership. They think of audience as separate function over here. So even to make that jump, when I went from director of audience to managing editor, it was the same boss at the time, and she was relatively new to the organization, but I pitched her on that job of I wanted to be managing editor. I saw an opportunity because she didn't have somebody in that role at the time, and I thought I could
Mhm.
help her, and we made it happen. And but it really took having somebody who like saw the potential in you and was willing to believe in your ability to grow and stretch and learn new things and take on a new challenge. And so I've been really, I think I've been really fortunate to find somebody who, yeah, has believed in me and has now another promotion happened a couple of years later, and so she's given me many opportunities and has kind of brought me along with her over the years as we've been building kind of the next chapter of Vox. And I think everyone should look out for those people in your career, right? The people who are going to believe in you, the people who see your potential
Mhm.
and see your ability to grow and are going to bring you along as they move on to bigger things and they want you on their team. So I think it's not something you can control necessarily, but I would
Mhm.
encourage everyone in their career to like find those people. Like you find that like sponsor mentor type. And mentor is sort of like a word with a lot of baggage, but like when you find the people who believe in you, like stick with them.
Okay. This is gonna be a jump off topic, but
Mhm.
the challenge I have to your statement is that I think you're spot on. I
Mhm.
think you're spot on. What I'm hearing from people, regardless of vertical where they're in, whether it's millennial or Gen X, and this is where we're going to go into AI a little bit in the conversation. There is so much change happening with people and jobs in
Yeah.
general because of the need for AI in some places expectation wise. I do sense there is this fear, or I don't sense a lot of what you just described in your career and in your environment over a span of years with a leader, because it really does appear that there's this fear within the corporate setting about AI taking my job, or there's a lot of kids that even I know out of school aren't getting jobs and opportunities in general. I do you think that what you described with your leader over a span of years that happened in the 2000s up until now with where you are at Vox or any place, doesn't matter if it's Vox, with the state of how jobs are changing, we're seeing eBay letting people go. We're seeing UPS letting people go,
Mhm.
Washington Post. I feel like there isn't as much opportunity for a lot of that mentoring or that proactive leader looking to an up and coming leader because there seems to be so much angst within the corporate setting. And I want to ask you what you thought, because obviously you're exposed to so much in terms of stories, trends, and news. Is that accurate to think? Or is that being or do those activities exist, but do you think it's being clouded because there's so much change happening with jobs being eliminated and or the fear of people losing their jobs with the advancements in AI tools?
I think so. I do believe that's happening. I think that, the challenge of leadership is that you want to, I hope most good leaders like care about growing the people on their
Mhm.
teams. But the challenge is that that growth also has to like align with what the business needs, right? And
Yep.
so I think, you know, I mean, I'm only speaking from my own experience. I can't speak to other
Sure.
companies or industries, but I think where that can sometimes be tough is when you have a really great leader, but you're looking at like what you need organizationally and they're telling you what they want and those two things don't quite match up. Like where it's tough, and
Mm.
I've felt this myself as a leader and managing many teams, where it's tough is when you have somebody who's really talented and they say, my career ambition is to do X, Y, and Z role, but X, Y, and Z role is not something that is like part of our business objectives. So I'm not going to be able to give that to them. So I think that, I think there's like a delicate dance to be done of like, if you want to grow within an organization, like what you want for your career also has to, you have to find ways to align it with like the business's goals overall, right? I think where it becomes hard is like when what you ideally want to be doing, what's your dream job, is like something that the business is like, well, that's not like core to our business. It's not central. And so that
Mhm.
might be the thing that eventually they decide, like, we can't keep doing that thing anymore. Or we don't have that role for you. Therefore, like, you can continue in the role that you're in, but like the dream job that you're telling me you want in 5 years, I'm probably not going to have that role for you here. Like I've been in that seat many times myself as a leader where I'm like, this is a wonderful employee and I want them to keep growing here, but I don't have the role that
Mhm.
they say that they want for their future career ambitions.
I actually appreciate that answer and the honesty,
Mm.
and a lot of people need to hear that. I'd be in conversations where someone wants to be X, Y, and Z, and you can see that they have the chops, you can see they have the drive,
Mhm.
but then I love when you said delicate dance because you are a leader, you are privy to and have exposure to certain conversations and certain executive conversations and planning and strategy that other team members aren't privy to or shouldn't be privy to at the time because of just of the role that they're in. And it is difficult when you want to help somebody and amplify it, but it just doesn't match with what the company's goals are because at the end of the day, it's a business. There's P&Ls, there's investors. And
Yeah.
I love that honest advice. And I think people need to hear that. It's not, we hear that it's the cliche, it's not personal. But
Yeah.
oftentimes it's not personal. It's something that, the business has to match. So thank you for breaking that down and providing that nuance even for
Yeah.
me. And before we go, I do want to talk about the elephant in the room. I love that you kind of giggled before. Let's talk about being a working mom.
Yeah.
And
Let's.
let's talk. So, do you have one child or two?
I have one. She is
Okay.
turning 4 next week, or I guess maybe by the time this airs, she will be 4.
Wow. So you're in New York, obviously, and you have this amazing, amazing career. Talk to me about how you look at the word balance or how you look at just life in general as a working mom. So, given your role and how busy you are, how is that going for you? And how do you feel that you're able to do what you love to do and not have to conform to what folks expect you to do or how you're supposed to be a mom in 2026 with the career that you have? Talk to me about how that's been for you over the last 4 years.
Gosh, how much time do we have? We're at the end of our time, but I could talk about this for like half an hour. Wow, I have like lots of thoughts to unpack on that. I'm trying to think about
Please.
where to start. One is I think I'm going to give you like a list of various thoughts here. One is I think that people think that like once you become a mom, you become less ambitious or you care about your
Hmm.
career less. I have not found that to be true in my experience at all. And I sort of chafe at that idea that like moms are less ambitious or less dedicated to their careers. Yeah, that just has not been my experience. I kind of knew that and everybody would tell me, when I was before I had my kid, everybody would tell me like, you don't know how you'll feel afterwards. And I was like, I think I do. I know myself and I was, I had 4 months of maternity leave, but, by the time that 4 months was up, I was honestly at 3 months, I was like, I'm ready to go back. I miss work. I might not be the norm. I know that that is not everybody's experience with maternity
Hmm.
leave. And I was lucky to even have 4 months of paid maternity leave, but I've always, been really passionate about my work and my career. And I was really excited to go back. In terms of balance, I think one thing that really helped me was letting go of other people's definitions of what balance is. If you start to consume a lot of like working parent stuff, content online, you'll start to internalize other people's ideas of what working parent balance is. And that means, no phones and no work pings between 5 and 7 p.m. Like that's like a common thing I see on the internet all the time among like parent circles is like I don't look at my phone between 5 and 7 so I can be fully present for my kid. I'm going to be honest. I look at my phone between 5 and 7. I do sign off work generally at 5. I go pick up my kid. I bring her home. I'm making dinner. She's around. She's playing. I have coworkers who are still working past 5 because lots of people do. And if somebody slacks me, like I'm not going to keep them waiting till I can answer a quick Slack ping on my phone. Sometimes those things are also necessary in my job. Like
Yeah.
in a senior leadership job, you can't have like such rigid boundaries because sometimes things can't wait till the next day. And that's okay. Sometimes I work after my kid goes to bed she goes to bed at 8 and then I might sign back online. I don't do it every day, but some days I do because I wasn't able to finish everything by the time I had to rush out at 5. And I'm okay with that. I think I understand that like those are the trade-offs I have to make
Hmm.
to be able to have a big career and a big job, which is what I wanted to have. And I think that you can still be like a present and engaged parent while also still having a big career. But I sort of had to let go of like other people's definition of
Yeah.
sort of like a rigid sense of what work-life balance means and find my own definition of what I feel comfortable with and what level of balance feels good to me.
When I had our second,
Mhm.
I was consulting, working on my own. And I remember it was kind of mat leave, but I worked for myself. And after like a month or two, I'm like, okay, I kind of miss doing stuff. And
Mhm.
I strapped him on my chest.
Mhm.
He'd be napping and I'd,
Yeah.
be doing stuff. And people would come over, oh my gosh, aren't you tired? But no, I need my brain. My brain has all these things it wants to do. And, I'm still able to do both. And I think that's a huge thing in terms of letting go of other people's definitions.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Yeah, I remember actually somebody telling me before I had my daughter, like, don't ever check in on work during maternity leave. Like, I got a lot of sort of like, you'll never get this time back. It's so precious. Never check in on work. The truth is, during the 4 months I was gone, like things happened at work and I was already running like a department by then and I was like in a leadership role. And so there were some like structural changes happening that involved like my teams and who's reporting to who. And my boss called me because she was like, I feel like you'd want to know about this and I want to get your input on it. And it affects your team. So like, I want your thoughts. And I appreciated that she did. And I wanted to stay in the loop on those things. And so I found like, just another example of the societal view generally is like I had everybody telling me like, do not think about work for 1 second during your entire maternity leave. You'll never get
Yep.
this time back. But I was like, honestly, I appreciated that my boss was like, I want to fill you in on some things that are happening because this involves your teams and I want your input. Like I really appreciated that. Like that was I felt like that was inclusive. And she knew me well enough to know that I would want that. So
Yeah.
it's just like I had to find my own definition of like what feels good to me and that may not be what feels good to others, but it worked for me and felt right for me.
I'm really loving your boss, by the way. I'm just like,
I have to send her
I
this
just,
podcast when it's
no,
live.
seriously. I mean, seriously, just whomever you are, just that is such a great leader with providing autonomy, mentorship, inclusion, and just making someone do their thing is amazing. I know we're almost at time. I should have asked you this earlier, but I just want to ask one question before I let you go, because this is another topic we could probably talk about for 2 hours. And I know it's a controversial one, but AI and how it is utilizing journalism and stories and reporting and training it so people are getting their search results via OpenAI or Anthropic. How are you all doing with that in terms of traffic that used to come to Vox.com proper, now
Mhm.
going to an LLM? How is that going for you?
Yeah. I think that like we at Vox we started preparing for this a long time ago. I think, so many publishers, including Vox in the 20s became really dependent on like first Facebook traffic and then when Facebook
Mhm.
traffic started to go away, then we all became really dependent on search traffic from Google. But I think, from like 2021, 22 onwards, we started to really think about how do we build we spent a lot of time thinking about how do we build a news outlet that isn't dependent on Facebook and Google.
Mhm.
And that isn't so reliant on scale, but is more about having direct, loyal relationships with our audience. And maybe that's a smaller audience than the days of when you got hundreds of millions of page views from
Mhm.
Google, but it's a more loyal and more engaged
Yeah.
audience. So our strategy over time, we started to really refocus on what is the journalism that we should be doing to build loyalty with an audience. Like, what are the stories we can publish that only Vox can publish that people can only find here, so they keep coming back to us and they want to return to Vox because they know they can only find this here. Rather than, I think there was an era when Vox and all publishers we chased SEO, and so we were writing lots of like quick hit posts for
Yeah.
Google traffic, and those could bring in like millions of page views, but it didn't like those were people who were sort of one and done. Like they read one story, they come in through Google and then they bounce back out. They're not like staying and
Yep.
engaging Fox over time and reading more of our work or watching or listening to more of our work. So this scale model, I think, did not like the search model did not translate to loyalty anyways. And, a couple years ago, we launched a membership program. And so we've been building consumer revenue as a business, as a line of business over the last few years. And we've just started to strategically, like we've been thinking a long time that we need to future proof Vox and make sure that like we are not so reliant on Google and on page views and ad impressions, because that can be so fickle. And so we need to build loyalty.
Smart.
You do that by having original journalism that people can only get from Vox. And hopefully that loyalty translates to people becoming Vox members and subscribers.
Thanks for that. And thank you for the most epic hour of selfishly catching up with someone that
Oh my
I've
God.
loved
Yeah, this
getting to
was
know
so
over the years.
fun.
Great. And for more information, you can, of course, visit vox.com, or is it voxmedia.com?
Vox.com.
Vox.com for any future stories, and also to become a member. Nisha Chittal, thank you so much for the time today and the amazing work that you do at Vox. I'm a reader, and I probably should look into being a member now. So thank you.
Oh, thanks. Well, thank you for having me. This was such a fun and delightful conversation. Really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Bye, everybody.